Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the 1995 film Safe, written and directed by Todd Haynes. This film stars Julianne Moore as a housewife who starts getting allergies and starts getting sick and starts thinking that she's becoming poisoned by the chemicals in the air and in the food and all that. So she goes to a rehab-style retreat, basically isolates herself and joins a cult. This is basically what I just call a bad film. And I'll get more into that a little bit later as far as the characters are written, as far as it's directed and edited. We're going to get a little bit more into that later. But first, if you like any kind of content like this, I'd really appreciate it if you take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I got a lot of projects coming up for this channel that I'm really excited about. In this film, Julianne Moore plays a housewife. She lives in a huge mansion, basically. And her biggest problem at the start of the film is that she doesn't really want to sleep with her husband, and the couch that they ordered is the wrong color. Those are her biggest problems. In her domesticated life, she starts kind of getting allergies and stuff, and she starts showing symptoms of basically what's depression and anxiety. So back in the 90s, and I'm speaking in general terms, obviously, a lot of women were living this domesticated suburban lifestyle, and they weren't really happy with it, and so they started showing, signs of anxiety and depression. I think a lot of them were kind of told that they needed to just kind of deal with it, or they was just kind of shoved under the rug or whatever. That's what this film plays off of. Now, is it realistic? Absolutely not. This lady is suffering what is just a basic anxiety attack, and everyone's looking at her like she's a clown. It wasn't really real life. I know the times were like that in a sense, but at the same time, it wasn't real life, and it was kind of played off to be like a thriller, and it was just really weird how they kind of like glossed over the actual issue and just made her out to look like a freak. There were also a couple times where her husband just kind of looked at her like she was weird and didn't really understand, and it wasn't real life is what I'm getting at, even though the times were kind of like that. So basically she goes to what I would consider like rehab, except the problem that they have is that they're all kind of are sick, and it's really vague what they're sick from. It's not really specified what anyone is sick from, and I don't think that no one is really sick from anything, but she goes to this thing, and it's kind of culty, and to me, it looks just kind of like drug rehab. This was another thing that just kind of threw me out of the movie, is besides it taking like an hour for her to actually get there, like half the movie, I'm sitting there and I'm like, what are they all doing? Because as someone who's been to rehab, you don't go to rehab just because you're not really feeling well. You go as like a last resort because you're like dying, and that's drug addiction rehab. But I know that these kind of like little retreats exist where people go and they're like self-help retreats and all that, but it was just so unrealistic that it just really threw me off. Everyone's just kind of sitting in church or rehab or something. It did show the dangers of groupthink, which is a term coined by George Orwell and is used in the book 1984, one of my favorite books of all time. Groupthink is basically when knowledge and big words are dumbed down and made really vague to get people to buy into a certain idea, and it doesn't really make any sense, but people know how to use it to manipulate other people into buying into a certain idea in order to act a certain way. In this case, in the film, they're all buying into a certain idea that the chemicals in the air and in the plastic or whatever are making them sick. And then they're going to lunch and eating out of, they're using plastic and all around them and stuff. So in one sense, it doesn't really make sense. In another sense, it's not really supposed to make sense. But it doesn't not make sense in the way that not making sense would make sense. And I know that that doesn't make any sense, but in a way it does. And I'll give you an example of that. So towards the end of the film, You know, all the people at this retreat, they stay in these like cabin kind of things. And there's this one that looks almost, it's like a little dome, little igloo that's made out of steel. And it looks like, you know, a little like bunker or something. It's a little white room. It's implied in the film that someone can go stay in this bunker if they like want to, if they're really scared and, you know, want to totally lock themselves away from the world. So a shot is set up where Julianne Moore's character and her husband are standing there, and then behind them there's the little igloo room and her son and then the car. So Julianne Moore is saying goodbye to her husband. Simultaneously, the kid takes a bag into the room and then back out to the car. Basically, they were establishing that the family was leaving her and she was moving into the room. And I was thinking to myself, you know, oh, I need to be paying attention to this film better. And so I went back and I watched it again, and I realized, no, it's not my fault. It's the film's fault. There was nothing in the scene that really gained my attention. And it happened so quick that, yeah, you could say that I just wasn't watching, and it's one of those movies where you need to watch every second. But no, as a viewer, you don't just have to get my attention, you have to earn my attention. And if an hour and a half into the film I miss a little detail because I'm so damn bored, then that's your fault, not mine. And I could fix this with a 5-second shot. All they had to do was make a quick cut to the kid's face looking inside her room, showing maybe even a little tear streaming down his face as he is leaving his mother to this hopeless, pretty pathetic existence where she's living in this cult completely separated from her world. The point of the whole thing was to not show the inside of the igloo until the very end of the film, but the end was so boring and unfulfilling that they could have just shown the inside and made an establishing shot of him even looking inside. So nothing in this film that they tried to use as suspense added up in the end. Nothing was earned on the end of the filmmakers. By the end of the film, her character has kind of changed because she's bought into all of these ideas, but it just ends with her looking in the mirror and saying, "I love you" to herself. She doesn't change at all. It was just boring and flat, and nothing happened. And then the things that did happen were like blink and you'll miss it, and it just didn't make any sense at the end. And I know that a lot of this isn't going to make sense to you, and I could go into all kind of descriptions and break down every scene, but there's no point because a lot of it just doesn't make sense. You know, her medical doctor at the beginning of the film, before she buys into all this crap, is basically saying nothing is wrong with her, nothing is wrong with you, when something is clearly wrong. So the medical people failed her, and I understand, and it just didn't make any sense. It was all stupid. The point that I'm getting at is that when I was younger, I would watch films, and certain things wouldn't make sense, and I would think to myself, okay, this is my fault, you know. But no, you can't expect every movie you watch to make perfect sense, because sometimes movies just suck. Sometimes movies are slow, they don't go anywhere, and they end nowhere. And that's it. I was expecting this to be a little more organized than it ended up being. The notes that I wrote, useless. There was also a guy that would be walking around in the background of the camp sometimes, and they'd point at him and be like, "Who's that?" And be like, "It's this guy." And that was never explained in the film. They show him 2 or 3 times and that's it. And he's also on like a lot of the promotional material for the film. Basically just showing that this film is poorly written, the characters are flat, they never change, a lot of things are never really explained, and I tried to explain some of them, but it just didn't make sense in the ways that it was supposed to not make sense. So that's safe. Julianne Moore is a housewife who is having allergies, suffering from anxiety and depression, possibly a little bit of psychosis that no one cares about. So she gets engulfed by a cult. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I have a lot of things coming up that I'm excited to do. I have about 100 pages left to Dune, so I'm going to be talking about this, making a video about it when I finish it. I also have a video coming up where I'm going to be talking about reading and how to get back into reading. Lots of stuff coming up for the channel. If you like any kind of content about film, culture, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.